It's the first week of 2023, and at Joyous Justice, we're thinking about joy and realizing society has taught us that joy is childish.
You're listening to the Joyous Justice Podcast,
A weekly show hosted by April Baskin with Tracy Guy Decker.
in a complex world in which systemic oppression conditions us to deny others and our own humanity. Let's dedicate ourselves to the pursuit and embodiment of wholeness, love, and thriving in the world and in our own lives. It's time to heal and flourish our way to a more joyously just future. Happy 2023, y'all. Happy 2023, Tracy.
Woohoo! Happy New Year. So April, one of the things that I'm thinking about as we kick off this new year, this new Gregorian year, and in terms of like intentions and even rededication as we've been framing it over the past several episodes, and us as Joyous Justice, is that I think that for many folks, the default understanding of joy is that it is something outside of our control. It is something that we luck upon, right? Like a penny on the ground that we maybe stumble into it. And I think one of the very simple and yet deeply profound alternatives to that notion that you offer, that Joyous Justice offers, is that joy is a thing that we can cultivate. It's not a penny that we happen upon on the street while we're walking, but actually something that we can cultivate. It is, in fact, a flower or a plant of some kind that we can cultivate and water and nurture and weave. I'm totally mixing up my metaphors, but I think our listeners get the idea that, you know, joy is not just something that just happens outside of our control, but is something that we can actually work to nurture and make happen. And so before we hit record, you were talking about something that you've returned to as a part of your work to make that happen, that we thought maybe we would share with our listeners and maybe even encourage folks to try.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy, for that setup. I really appreciate it. I engaged in a process of rededication this past weekend. We took some time off to continue to rest. Our team did at Joyous Justice, and I did it not just because it's good to do in theory, but because it is somewhat unusual for me as someone who generally has pretty robust self-care practices, but I was genuinely, truly exhausted and didn't think I could keep functioning unless I got restorative rest and was able to take time to refocus. And not just because 2022 was a demanding, dynamic year of much learning that I do believe on a spiritual level that in part I did bring upon myself by setting a very bold and ambitious intention that played out, and I just hadn't fully anticipated what that would entail. Anyway, over this past weekend, I did a number of things, and one of the things that is most jumping out to me as something that I want to share on our episode on the podcast today is revisiting a list that now lives in my mind. It's in one of my old journals, but my list of what brings me joy. As Tracy was saying a moment ago, joy now has become to me the way I think about or describe joy. I wouldn't even talk about it the way Tracy talks about it because it's alchemized and it's deeply embedded in my being and an existence at this point. But that was not at all the case before. Just even a few years ago, several years ago, when I was taking some time to learn about joy, I think I was where a lot of people are, where like it's like yeah, that would be a nice to have, but also there's a ton of tough stuff that's happening. And I don't want to be like toxically positive. That wasn't really a phrase in that moment, but I don't want to be faking feeling things that I'm not feeling, but I was starting to get it at that time of what I'm living into now of, oh, actually though, this can be really strategic and on my terms, as Tracy was just saying. And especially because of all of the bold leadership work I am doing and the different demands that I navigate, that I choose to navigate, because these are causes and issues that are important to me. It's all the more important that I deeply anchor in joy. And at that point, this was around 2017, I'd taken on a really big, ambitious national leadership job, a professional role that was in a number of ways the opportunity and job of a lifetime. And as the first person of color in that role, and as I think also the youngest person who'd been in an executive, atypically young executive for any large, near $100 million institution, I was a young executive. And I remember I was experiencing all these wonderful things and pushing myself and honestly overworking often. But I remember noticing earlier on in that journey around 2015 and 16 that it was a gentle noticing, but I noticed in between the busyness, I'm not happy right now. Like, I'm doing work that I love and I'm working on causes I care about, but I'm not feeling. And honestly, I was so busy at the time, I usually didn't take long to think about it. Like, it'd be when I was walking to the subway, like in the midst of my commute, I would notice for a few moments, like, I'm not really happy. I also wasn't unhappy because I had the job of my dreams and was doing incredible work, but there wasn't enough joy. I didn't have the word for it then, but there wasn't enough joy in my life at that time. So circling back to what I wanted to focus on and actually going through some of our joy lists and thinking about it together, because I want to build mine more now in this season of my life. I was taking a class taught by Sonia Choquette. And in one of the lessons, she talked about do things that bring you joy. And this is a leader I really respect. And she often talks about having high vibrational energy and to cultivate that from a place of sincerity and realness in a way that resonated with me, that didn't feel fake or stupid or fluffy. And her family isn't Jewish, but her mother was still a Holocaust survivor. And she had that grit of life experience that spoke to me. And anyway, so I had to sit down, and I really noticed at that time, so this is now 2 years into this role, into doing what I loved. And as I went to make a list, and she recommended that we make a list of what brings us joy, I didn't even know, which I actually think is quite common for people. And I think when I talk about joy at times, I think that's where they are. And at times I dedicate myself to creating the reality I want for myself in the world, that at times I forget, right, where I was. And so in case, and earlier this past weekend, I wasn't in that place. Like, I'm in a really different place because I did that work a few years ago, but I noticed like my list is a bit stale. And I've since moved internationally. The circumstances of my life are very different. I now have my own company, and I think I made lists since then, but I'm in one of those moments that you might be too, or where you have been or will be, where it just feels like a really pivotal time of shift for me. We have, Tracy and Sarah and I have revamped the structure of our company and the way we operate and the way and positioned ourselves so that we can work with more people around the most visionary, bold work that they and we want to do together. And I've been navigating a lot of change in terms of growth and stepping into being my most authentic, brave self. And so I thought, it's about time. I'm going to flip it. I have my notebook in front of me here, and I'm going to flip to the page. And I thought, it's about time for me to revisit this list. But to close that loop on the story I was telling, when I first did this several years ago, in around 2017 or so, and I want to name that later that year and in the following year, massively amazing things happened. And it wasn't only because of this, but this was definitely part of it. Like me anchoring into what I love and noticing that. And then it just there was a ripple effect, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So it's helpful to say this both to share with you a little bit of my process and also because I needed to revisit some of this. When I went to make my list a few days ago, when I went to make the list, I was like, I actually don't, I've been working, and now in retrospect, I would say overworking. I've been working so much, that I don't even know. Like I don't know what brings me joy, and I don't even really remember what brings me happy. And what makes me happy. And the thing that helped me start to jog my memory was when I thought, what brought me joy when I was a little girl? What made me joyful when I was little? Right. And then the idea started to, and I was like, and that I could remember really vividly. Like I liked playing with my light bright. And I liked doing this thing that is like weird now, but I really loved working with the materials I had, which was like the multicolored toilet paper and like taking glasses and like layering them or like finding multicolored sand or like anything that I could find around me and making different like mosaics or collages, doing different things, playing pretend. Anyway, a bunch of things started to flow from there and turning that to go back to a little bit of a slightly a variation of what we talked about recently, but it like lit a little bit of a fire within me and it illuminated my heart a little bit. And it made me start to notice like, oh yeah, I had a few years ago, I had a vision/dream, like a visionary dream where I was on a horse. And I felt like to honor that dream in part, I needed to go horseback riding. And I discovered when I did that I love horseback riding. I love horseback riding. Horseback riding brings me joy. And then it kind of started to flow from there. And in the days and months ahead, I looked and I remembered at that time that like, oh, I love knitting and I like dancing and all these things started to flow. And just even remembering them felt like a healing in and of itself. Like, oh yeah, because most of them were things that weren't that far out of reach. I'd been distanced from them for a long time. So all of that to say, all of that, I don't know, Tracy, if there's anything you want to respond to in what I said before we share. And just to be clear, I prepped this. I actually have the list, Tracy. Didn't have time to prepare this. So Tracy may just be sharing things off the cuff, which is great. And I'm also hoping selfishly that maybe through this conversation together that it might inspire me to make my list longer because I think it's a bit incomplete right now. So I'm hoping through listening to you, I might remember more things that bring me joy, from mundane things to bigger things. But before we get to that, is there anything in what I shared? You were certainly giving me body language over video, but was there like affirmation and resonance or intrigue? Anything you want to share?
I love the idea of starting with the memories, the childhood memories.
Yeah,
it's really interesting and telling that in some ways we have easier access to joy from childhood than adulthood. I mean, I don't think it's not a coincidence. I think that's part of our conditioning has been to deprioritize. I don't know if that's a word. But that part of our conditioning has been to sort of, I mean, you even kind of alluded to it when you were talking about how hard you were working with that that international or that national leadership position that you had, when you were saying, you weren't really thinking about it because you were just too busy. And it was like in those like quiet moments where you were like, oh, I'm not happy. Like that really resonates with me, that as adults, we've sort of been taught that, well, it's paradoxical because we definitely have been taught that we should be happy. But we've also been conditioned to do things that make our happiness a secondary or tertiary or lower priority in terms of how we spend our energy. So that was really resonating to me, and like a remarkable note that like our childhood joy is is in some ways more accessible than what would
than the
bring us joy
now.
now.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have a couple different thoughts about that. One thing I want to say is that as you're reminding me as you're talking that I've for a while now, I mean, I think when I was a kid, it was different, but as I was thinking about, am I happy? And then even then, like when I was more joyful and content before, I often didn't resonate with the word happy, even though I think it's I think it's part of this is truly just semantics and that they really are basically mean the same thing. But to me, I connected happiness with more of the superficiality of American culture. So even when I was in a happier season in my life, I thought of it as me being content, right? Or me experiencing pleasure, right? That there was something that felt kind of like almost like a balloon about happiness, like, and not in a good way, that it felt, even though I think, again, like part of it's semantics, part of it is about the different ways or the different messages around white supremacy culture or capitalism or different things. But I share that just to share in case anyone else too also finds that, like, whether you directly resonate with precisely what I'm saying or just more generally resonate with, yeah, like as I'm thinking about this, like I'm not really into joy, but like comfort really speaks to me, or all of that to say that I think that that's a worthwhile exploration and train of thought for us to notice and identify what language or concept are we most cozy with in terms of the pantheon of words relating to well-being and pleasure and feeling good, right? And I think I was debating it in my mind, and as I was listening to you reflect back the childhood memory piece, I was thinking not, but I think I was remembering incorrectly that I also want to shout out. I think that was also a suggestion that Sonia Choquette gave in that lesson around joy. There was definitely a part of the lesson. I think maybe it was that I paused it. I think that's part of it. I paused the lesson because I was like, I don't know. I needed to like try to figure it out. And I thought about it. And I think I literally went to my closet, like what was kind of in storage, what was, in the part of my closet that I typically didn't go into. And I was like, oh yeah, yarn. Oh yeah, I like to work with, and then I think I went back to it, and she said the thing about childhood, and then I went back into my own zone. But so I also wanted to shout out and acknowledge that that good idea was not one that I originally conceived. Yeah, so maybe we can start there. So I named some of my things, and I could name more. Tracy, do you want to name? And I would invite our friend listening in to also reflect on this too. And maybe if it's helpful for you, if you want to write it out, or even if you're someone who likes collaging or drawing, or if you want to draw or doodle it out, either while we're talking or afterward, you might want to do that for both this and the next phase of it. What brought you joy? What brought young Tracy joy?
I'm really, my brain is stuck on the fact that I have been conditioned to think of these things as childish. I love stickers. I was a sticker kid.
Oh, stickers!
Yeah. I really liked drawing. As my childhood aspiration was to be an animator. So I loved drawing. I loved cartoons, and yeah, those are some of the ones I don't know. You're probably a little too young, but my Gen X listeners will remember a show called The Electric Company, which was a show for kids that was like a skit kind of a show. It was educational, but it was entertainment. And like they had this mystery thing at the end with the Bloodhound Gang. And anyway, the credits for The Electric Company at the very beginning, it was like this kid yelling, "Hey, you guys." And my last name was Guy. And I genuinely believe that at your house, it would have said, "Hey, you Baskins." I genuinely believe that until I was probably like 15. And I didn't know how they did it, but it was amazing that they were like using our name. And that brought me joy every time. every time we watch The Electric Company and that beginning credit, hey, you guys. And I was like, Emily, oh, that's my sister. It's us. They're talking to us. Man.
Can I insert something with that? You know what that reminds me of?
I didn't intend to share that, but
I loved it, you know, and it reminds me of a whole genre of things like that. Like it wasn't even in the song, but in Michael Jackson's Black or White song, which I loved, when he says like, it doesn't matter if you're black or white. It brought me joy every time for years, even now to say, or both. Like, I it felt like it was my song with that like little carrot addition. It was great. It was just like, yes, exactly. I liked the part. I was kind of confused about it for years in different ways. At the beginning of that song, where, you know, it's like the scene that they have on the recording itself too, where it's like a boy playing rock music in his room, and then the dad's like, "Turn it off now!" Like banging. And I was also always intrigued that sound just like my dad when he yells, because my dad's black, and I was pretty sure in that story it was like a white kid and his white dad, but although maybe he was a black dad, since the song was about, to me it was about multiracial families. I don't think that's actually what it was about exactly, but for me, I was living for that song. Yeah, or a little bit less so, but still, like in high school, dating myself, Maya's song Ghetto Superstar. At one point, the hip hop artist says, "Cry like a matador," and I would just get so excited because that was our school mascot. I'd be like, exactly. So, you know, like those little signs of being seen, you know, that were just so joyful. It's like, oh, it's kind of, but it's like for me, it's like for us, it's like it's for our school, right? And I think that there's something, like, without taking too long into it, that I think is actually quite spiritual and meaningful and isn't simply childish. I think that there's a child inspired wisdom in that actually, yes, we are dust, and also this world was made for us.
Yeah, I just to be clear, like having this conversation is making me really reassess that this is a disservice that we have done to ourselves, that this is a form of repression, if not oppression, that we've been taught to discard what makes us happy or joyful as childish. That's messed up.
Yes. Yes, Tracy.
Messed up.
Yes.
That we would, that we would sort of, I mean.
And I had that realization too in a different kind of way as I was doing it, as I was thinking about like the light bright, that's for a kid. But then I quickly saw that there were things that were either exactly the same or similar that I could enjoy, as like that it actually wasn't, you know, that I could look for light shows, or I could enjoy things that were sparkly, you know, like that's why now, like I do these little things here and there. Like I have this, I'm showing Tracy right now, this like uber gold glitter notebook cover. Right. Or like when you said stickers, it reminded me, I added that to my list. Tracy, by like, oh yeah. Like when I was really in my joy zone at times, I would notice like, oh, look at that fun sticker deck. I'm going to put that in my notebook. Yeah. And we did it as a team, and we did that with my team in that job as I was starting to get into that flow. And I started weaving it into my job and started noticing, kind of jump ahead for a moment, that actually, especially once I got through the first 2 years, which I was building a brand new department, and like I probably could have woven more joy in, and also that it was just tough, but that there actually was tons and plenty of space to weave in inspiration and humor and funny videos, and that actually helped make the work lighter. Also, it further clarified for us our focus when we were in connection with joy. It helped us to be more ambitious and bold in what we were doing. So, yeah. So I'm curious for you, what's coming up for you? And is it making you giggle? Is it making your eyes sparkle? Is it making you feel a sense of comfort? Something else that I liked from childhood was planning out and scheming weird Halloween costumes with my mom, and also having is it perennial? The annual debate with my childhood rabbi about whether or not observing Halloween was kosher or not. He was in the no, thank you, no, it is not camp. And every year we would try to do things that were like harvest or fall related, or but either way, we were able to do it in our own home. That was part of our American Jewish minchag, or custom. And I was with some weird stuff, but it brought us a lot of joy to make it. Like one year I decided I wanted to be a bunch of grapes. Who knows why? And so we just like got a bunch of purple balloons and strung them together and found a way to wrap them around me in such a way that I looked like a bunch of grapes. Another year, which was really tiring for my arms, but I made it work. I decided to be a die, like multiple like dice, but like a die. And like had a box, and that was really fun. And it's interesting because in some ways, compared to other people, I wasn't so into costumes. And like for Purim every year, like you can see pictures of me from Purim over the years, and I just generally had like a tiara that I got at the Purim carnival, and I would just be wearing something like a floral jumper or romper. But that was something fun, was the Halloween costumes and just making weird stuff. Tracy, are there other things from childhood that you recall that brought you joy?
My sister and cousin and I used to love to play floor is lava. You know, and you have to
the floor is lava.
Yeah, and like jump from furniture. Sorry, jump from furniture to furniture. Like we would toss couch pillows. Like I don't know why we thought the couch pillows could survive the lava, but they did.
They're tough, rugged pillows.
Yeah, that was a good time.
One thing that I recall that is exactly the same now, and it's just as magical, is even as a kid, I really loved solitude in nature. Like I wouldn't have called it that then, but I loved just sitting in nature and exploring it, or going on walks and like feeling the breeze on my cheek, or seeing the different animals, and sometimes making up stories and sometimes not, and just watching them and seeing where they go and just feeling really good. And that was something that aged with me, that over time that felt like wine, that I just continued to notice, like it just deepened, like the relationship just deepened over time. And even if I'm gone or not proximate to nature, I mean, all of this is, we're all in nature. But in terms of being closer to wild environments, there was a lot of magic in burying things, and I have no idea where. I buried multiple time capsules. I could not tell you. I have a sense of like I was like, it's 10 steps. Like I wrote it, but even then, even as I was doing it, I was like, I'm not going to remember this a week from now, but maybe I will. But it was like, it's 10 steps to the right, and then over the railroad tracks, and then near the rock. And if you look at so somebody at some point, who knows, maybe we'll find whatever it was that I buried. But I enjoyed that.
One thing that I did as a kid that I still do, well, I think I started when I was a teenager, but I would like do voices for animals. Like I used to make my friends laugh. I remember very clearly sitting, must have been on a field trip or something. We were watching pigeons. We were like watching pigeons interact with each other, and I was like doing voices for them. And I still do that. I crack my family up making voices for our dogs and stuff. We had an old beagle. He's no longer with us, but I used to do this voice, and he would call me Lady. He would be like, "Lady, can I please have some of what you're eating?" I would make myself laugh every time. I would have whole conversations with him.
Something that I started doing in my 20s that was very childlike, and I can't remember if I did this as a kid. I did it with my dog. As a kid. And then when I was missing not having a dog in my 20s, I would do it when I would be carpooling with my friend when she would be driving, that basically anytime I would see a dog, I would make up a song on the spot. be like, hi, I'm Sparky and I have a little tail. I'm prancing like a queen. La, 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 la. Like, it would, look at my spots. I look like peppermint or like, what is that called? Like your dog. I started to make a song when you showed me. God willing, it all works out.
Yeah, we're getting her actually by the time it airs a couple days.
Yay. Yeah. So like as soon as I saw it, I started to make a song about how your dog looks a little bit like cookies and cream. Cookies and cream. Cookies and cream. The Guy Decker dog is made of cookies and cream. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes they're pretty good. Like at one point my friend was like, you're actually pretty good at that. I'm clearly like not in shape right now with it, but I would like do these whole little absurd things. And sometimes people enjoyed it. Other times people thought it was weird. And for me, it was my chance to remind myself that I have a love of, like, I honestly didn't care. Like, whatever was happening. I was like, there's a dog and it deserves a song. And like, and what inspired me around that was, the famous 80s movie, the one that I grew up with that I think of as classic, the version of Little Orphan Annie that I grew up with. I also saw it on Off-Broadway, but my mom showed me the film that has Carol Burnett and what's her name? What is that brilliant vocalist? Bernadette
Peters.
Thank you. Bernadette Peters. That cast. And
yeah, that's the one I know.
Yeah. And that inspired me, right? Where Annie's singing to Sandy. And so I always, so that got me like, I love that. Like, I'm going to sing to Beamer and sing. And also I would sing him songs because he had a lot of anxiety. He was abused before we got him. My parents would get rescues and he would just freak out when a guest was there. And if we didn't let him like bark at them and we brought them into our room, he would cry and I would like sing him, how much is that beam in the window? And I would just sing him different songs and stuff to try to comfort him. So I think this is really great and sweet and so sweet that I think I want us to continue to ruminate on this, and I want to give you a chance and I want to give our listeners a chance to think about, just ruminate on this a bit more. What brought us joy when we were young? And to take some time to capture it, and also to think about what brings you joy now. And let's continue that in our next episode. I think this is sweet and good for now. Do you want to, I feel like you have some inspiration to bring us home, Tracy.
I guess the thing that this is probably self-explanatory and I'm going to say it out loud anyway.
Great. I think that's good.
But for me, I like from where I started, and part of the power of this list and this kind of like back and forth is so that we can recognize and look for, if my initial metaphor of the pennies, or if it's a plant, whatever, that we're walking our path and joy is there growing on the path, on the side, or in the path, like having these conversations and remembering them will allow us to recognize that plant instead of just walking right past it, which is what we have been conditioned to do. We've been conditioned to think that moving along that path as fast as possible is our goal. And having these conversations and making the list, or just, remembering, allows us to be like, oh yeah, there's stuff besides the path and I'm allowed to enjoy those things.
Savor it, enjoy it, use it to help guide us where we want. When we have a point in the road, like notice the things, oh, there are more flowers down that road, or there are more pennies. Which do I want? What? And I would just add on to, I love what you said so much. I had full body chills because I was just reminding myself, revisiting a lesson, a more advanced metaphysical lesson that ties into exactly what you said. Basically, I'm just thinking about the fractal nature of what you said, that making the list is helpful. One, so you can actually start to weave in some of the notice. And I find often it's organic. You don't even need to, as you make the list, you're like, oh yeah, I can weave that into my morning ritual right now, or this thing, or I've been doing the shower this way, but if I listen to music or I get stickers to put on the wall or whatever, like, are there other things that it's not as distant as we think it is? And some of the things are, but actually by doing these things, it enlivens us. And as Tracy said, it conditions us, even if you don't write it down, just to be able to recognize it. And this applies in a fractal sense in bigger ways too, around other things, that practicing getting into this feeling place. That I also wanted to say when you were talking, not just the idea of it, but part of what I'm taking from our conversation, Tracy, which was so much more fun to do it with you than just with myself solo, is the feeling that it generated within me, which wasn't this like high elevation joy. It felt like in my kishkas and in my chest and just felt good. It was like, oh yeah, like that. It felt intuitive and wonderful, right? And so as we're walking along the path too, noticing opportunities as they arise and also attuning ourselves, practicing noticing that feeling. So it's such that as we're navigating through the path, as a certain scent comes by or as different things happen, or we're in an exchange where we don't immediately recognize it as joy, but we notice, oh, but I'm feeling that feeling again that I felt when I was listening, when I was in conversation spiritually with Tracy and April. And as I was in conversation with my journal and my spiritual entourage, or however you choose to, I higher self, however, or just with, myself or the divine, oh yeah, that feeling is coming up again. And and so my hope for us is much less, although if that is your bag and if that brings you joy to map this stuff out, down to the hour or minute or something, then you do that. But also what I want to invite for folks, especially when we have so much going on, is to let this just be, let it be a scavenger hunt in different ways. And as Tracy said, to start noticing these things and savoring them as they come up on our path, as you're crossing someone who you don't expect, as you're talking, noticing like, oh, I'm getting that feeling again. I notice, actually, is this someone who I want to invite them? Or am I just noticing that these kinds of exchanges bring me joy? So as they happen, for me to remember, oh, this might be a moment for joy the next time it happens, right? And that it can be like this a scavenger hunt of appreciative inquiry around what makes us feel good and how can we actually start to plan that in. And so I think we can, and weave it in, both plan it in at times, and also take advantage of moments. And it doesn't have to be hours. It could be just even moments of, oh, wait, this is really funny. Let me just allow myself to be immersed in the joy of this moment, and start to collecting those different moments and see how they string together or weave together for you. So I'm excited for us to do a part 2 on this and bring it into the present moment. And in the meantime, for me to take more time and remember, because I've done this exercise before, but in talking with you, Tracy, and in thinking about it now and with everything I've learned and all I've been through, I think there's more to mine. I think there's more memories that I'm not remembering right now, that with a little bit of time and the loving invitation that I'm offering to you and to me and to us to remember that magic, because a lot of it actually hasn't gone away and a lot of it is within reach for us now. And in the spirit of rededication, it's so much easier to reach for and engage with things that part of us already knows, that we already have a relationship with or are adjacent to, than recreating the wheel, which we don't have to do in the process of rededication. So with that, wishing you a joyous and just and meaningful 2023, filled with hopefully lots of love, life, lessons, and support. And we're excited to be with you on that journey. Much love for now. Thanks for tuning in.
To learn more about Joyous Justice LLC, our team, and how you can get involved with our community, check out the info in our show notes or find us at joyousjustice.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, show us some love.
Subscribe wherever you're listening.
Tell your people. Share what you're learning and how your leadership is evolving.
Stay humble,
but not too humble.
and keep going.
because the future is ours to co-create.